So we'd love to hear how you got started in the Salesforce ecosystem at such a young age.
Yeah, it's a pretty great story. It's not normal for kids to be doing Salesforce in high school, but I do think it's indicative of the general trend in the Salesforce ecosystem, which is that everybody gets into it in a different way, right? It's the most ubiquitous piece of software that you don't hear about until you're out of college and in your first job. In my instance, I was really interested in investment banking, actually. And when I was 17, I cold called a whole bunch of investment banks trying to get a job. 25 of them said no, probably the smart move. Number 26 said, hey, if you learn Salesforce, we need somebody to migrate us from Salesforce Classic to Salesforce Lightning. And we're willing to give you a shot if you learn it and teach yourself and come on as a contractor. And so in my dorm room, I was sitting there rolling through a Trailhead, doing all the modules, trying to become a ranger so that I could go and get that job in the industry that I wanted. And that was sort of the first step on the journey. I had no idea that I would end up making this my career, but that exploded into me speaking at Dreamforce as part of the keynote, traveling around, talking to students about how they should learn Salesforce, doing a bunch of podcasts, all of those fun things. And then eventually, of course, setting up my own SI, which has been a great journey and one that I wouldn't trade for the world.
Love it. So you build Carabiner Group around the concept of RevOps-as-a-Service. Can you tell us more about that, the company, and where you see the biggest opportunities in the revenue operations space today, especially within the Salesforce ecosystem?
Yeah. Happy to. So, I mean, where Carabiner originally started was Salesforce as a service. When I noticed, this was 2020, there was so much need for work, so much demand for service, and the supply was so low of practitioners that it was incentivizing bad behavior, right? $50,000 quick starts that really didn't set up the customer for success. And the service providers didn't care because there was always that next client down the road who would, hire them to help. And that's a little bit challenging given that, Salesforce is very rarely something that you can set up once and not touch again, right? It needs that ongoing service provider to assist it and keep it working. And so my initial thesis was that, hey, instead of charging you $50,000 for a month worth of work and then burning you and never getting to work with you again, why don't I charge you $100,000 for a year's worth of work and work on a managed service basis to implement the tool, make all the tweaks, no strict SOWs, all T&M to make sure that the client actually was successful. That then over time evolved as we got into the client environments to be more of this RevOps-as-a-Service premise, which is Salesforce Plus, right? CRM Plus, all of the other packages that are necessary to run a modern go-to-market tech stack. And that really unlocked our meteoric growth. We grew 500% year over year once we started offering that as a service offering, because at the time there really was no one offering this holistic tech stack approach. You were proud of the fact that you just did Salesforce. You bled blue. You wouldn't touch HubSpot with a 10-foot pole. When the reality is that those tools integrated together are a better together story and make you a better service provider. So we were one of the first to come up with this RevOps-as-a-Service premise, trademarked that term, rolled that out into the market, and then continued sort of to sell that until we, last year sold the company to a larger private equity-backed growth consultancy called SBI Growth, which is where I'm at now, leading the team and into our next phase of growth.
Love it. So you're definitely a RevOps expert. So what are some of the biggest mistakes you see companies when it comes to the RevOps strategy and execution?
Well, I think there's two that I would say come to mind. One is focusing too much on the sort of tactical day-to-day need. So getting absorbed into, hey, I need this report, I need that report, I need this field added, that field added, I need to set up this tool or that tool. And losing track of the fact that revenue operations is supposed to be a strategic function. It's supposed to be this thing that can look ahead a quarter or two at bookings trends or churn trends or any sort of analytics around data and be able to surface to people the fact that, hey, actually, it turns out we're heading off a cliff, or we have this great opportunity to spend more here and get this outcome, and really be that trusted data wizard to the CRO, CMO, CFO in these firms to really guide the company ship through what is fundamentally an economic storm that we're in right now, avoiding the pitfalls. So that would be one piece, becoming too tactical and not zooming out strategically. The other, which I've talked about a little bit already, is this data premise, right? Data governance and data quality is the backbone of modern revenue operations. And the reality is that most folks don't have clear data governance. They don't have data dictionaries. They don't have compliance standards around these things. And that isn't by their own faults, but like fundamentally, that will become the battleground on which these struggles are won and lost in the next 10 years, because the data is what all of the AI tools are going to need to operate off of. And if your data isn't in a good position and your data strategy isn't in place, then you're going to be in a much more challenging position to actually execute against your AI vision.
That's a great point. So how do you think the role of your typical RevOps consultant might evolve? And you kind of touch it used to be Salesforce, silo, bleeding blue, then integrating to third party tools like HubSpot. Now having to really have an understanding of data architectures. As AI becomes more prominent, how do you think that will shape the role of RevOps consultants?
I think one of the things that I would say is that for at least the next 2 years, I think the primary role of a RevOps consultant is to work with their clients to develop an AI strategy that is both near term and long term focused. I think we are in a very good position to know what the market currently looks like, know what the market will look like in 3 months and 12 months, and advise our clients, on what decisions they should be making, what bets they should be placing, but not on there isn't one size fits all for this stuff. I mean, the very nature of the AI movement is the fact that it is going to be very bespoke. It is going to be very custom. What is right for company A is not going to be right for company B. And if you try to take that approach that one size fits all, you're going to make missteps. And worse than missteps, you're not going to see the ROI for months and months and months, versus taking a much more bespoke, company focused thing of saying, what are the biggest problems that are facing us and what are the easiest things we can pick up off the ground, custom tailoring an AI strategy to that. I think that's where an AI, slash operations consultant can come in and be able to say, okay, we understand what your business does. We understand where the friction points in your current workflows. Let's now then remedy those restriction points with an AI-based solution that we are aware of in the market that hasn't reached traction yet or hasn't reached product market fit yet, but is nevertheless the best solution for solving this problem. And that's, I think, the real role for the next 2 or 3 years, is helping to, again, guide these companies through making these decisions that fundamentally are existential in nature.
Got it. And I think something that I really like about your company is the approach to hiring, and you talk about alternative talents. So can you tell us a little more about the strategy and how do you choose to invest in people that maybe they don't have the traditional tech background and make sure they are the right uh, people that are going to be driving these churches at your clients?
Well, the nice thing is that AI has sort of made a bit of a level playing field recently, right? And that, if you have strong instincts, smart critical thinking, good customer service experience, and understand how data works, you are in the top 1% of practitioners, because those things, those soft skills, are actually going to be the things that differentiate you when you have an AI sitting next to you who can help answer the more technical, tactical questions that before you needed to study a textbook for. And so this AI literacy component, because it's so new, because it's so evolving, if you are up to date on that, it doesn't really matter what you did 10 years prior. It matters that you're up to date on the cutting edge of the technology. And so we're able to take talent profiles that historically have been riskier to bring into organizations. Just people who don't have the background normally would need to go through 5 or 6 years of entry level work in order to get, the rotations, et cetera, and give them that exposure in a rapid way to then make them extremely competent at guiding people through that journey that I talked about earlier. And so that might look like a barista from Starbucks. It might look like a kid fresh out of school. It might look like somebody who's making a career change and going from sales and marketing, being on the practitioner side to being on the operator side on the back end. So I personally love alternative talent profiles because it allows us to bring together the people who may be overlooked by the market, get great value, and give great opportunity to those folks to thrive inside of our organization.
Okay, and how do you bridge these two together? On one hand, you have a slower moving system, like the revenue engine of Salesforce used to be CPQ, now moving to Revenue Cloud Advanced. But these systems, once they're in, they remain for many years at the de facto solution. When you have all these AI, all these outside of Salesforce, things that are moving and changing so rapidly. How do you keep up with the two and make sure the two are connected and adding value to your client?
Well, I think there's two things. One is that I spend an awful lot of time talking to vendors and staying on top of the market. So new AI tools, I get demos every week of what's coming, and from our established partnerships with companies like Salesforce and Gong and Marketo and HubSpot. Like, we see sneak peeks of that stuff too, to know what's happening so that we can really advise our clients well. I think when it comes to how do they work together, listen, I'm not here telling you that you need to abandon the Salesforce platform, but what I am saying is that pretty quickly here, we're going to have a suite of AI rip and replace tools that exist that make it a lot easier to migrate off of one platform and onto another. And, that is fundamentally going to also change the dynamic, which is that, hey, you've signed a multi-year contract, but is it still worth it to get off of this tool so that you can get this new AI-powered solution that's going to be that much better for you and your organization? The answer may very well be yes, but it doesn't mean you have to abandon the core, switch your CRM, for example. Salesforce still has great value, and as they embrace AI more fully and Agentforce becomes more mature, I expect that they will become much more competitive with the upstarts and with a lot more security because it's Salesforce.
So can we maybe double click there a little more? So outside of Salesforce, what are some of the trends you see either in AI, data privacy, agents? What are the things you're most excited that you're seeing out there in the RevOps world that maybe they're in the pipeline for the next few years to come?
Yeah, I think historically, platform-based point solutions that try to migrate towards platform-based solutions, I've always felt them to be a little bit, weak in terms of the market offering. Like, I personally have always felt that, hey, if you're the best call recorder in the business, you really just need to stick to being the best call recorder and, allow for that to be what you're known for, what your core value is. Be still the provider that gives you 10x the value of what you're paying for the tool, rather than trying to become something that is worth 150 or 175 bucks a seat per user. I think one of the things that AI is doing is it's allowing folks to tackle the platform question slightly differently, which is saying, hey, not what are the auxiliary tools that I can expand into CRM, marketing automation, data enrichment, etc., and try to displace an existing vendor, but rather, around my core value proposition, what are things that I used to not be able to do, feature sets that I used to not be able to offer, that I now can because of AI? So let's take Gong as an example. I think Gong's done a great job of expanding their feature set offerings through additional products that are truly adjacent to their core value offering, through forecast, through engage, through whatever, right? Rather than saying, oh, we need to go build a CRM tool and have that be in direct competition towards Salesforce, because for quite some time, very much so, right? They viewed each other as direct competition. And so I think that's one element, which is that, hey, the tools themselves will actually become better rather than just trying to get more market share, right? Which, I understand from an economic perspective, but from a practitioner's perspective, that's a little bit more challenging to reconcile. The second trend is just this overall feeling that right now, problems that used to be unsolvable, so problems that we used to just dismiss as being, all right, that's a necessary part of our business, are no longer unsolvable, in that the technology has allowed us to build bespoke custom solutions to solve for what used to be table stakes problem sets for businesses that now are not. I'll use an example. One of our clients retrofits old buildings for like earthquake preparedness. And in order for it to be a good prospect for them, it needs to be over 20 stories tall, built before 1950, and still have a certain degree of building material. And in order to get all of those three data points together, you had to look through approximately 6 data sets that didn't talk to each other, lived in entirely different silos, weren't proprietary, so they came from public data sites, things like that, that meant it was fundamentally impossible to scan a new city, say Milwaukee, and say, these are the 100 prospects and who owns them and are they good opportunities for us to reach out to. That all had to be done manually by a team of 5 or 10 people and moving city by city by city. We can now build an agent to look across all 6 of those data sets actively, proprietarily, and say, okay, these are the right prospects. And that doesn't require that team of 5 or 10 people anymore. That is a problem that fundamentally changes the way that company goes to market and allows them to attack 3 to 5 more markets at a time than they ever were before. This is for any of their competitors who aren't doing that, That is a remarkable competitive advantage that is truly proprietary to a piece of technology that they now own, albeit powered by shared infrastructure through the AI agent infrastructure components that we know are out in the market. That's a paradigm shift moment. That's the moment where you're like, holy smokes, if I don't get with the movement, I'm going to be left behind by somebody who does. And you might blink and you're at 40% market share today and you're at 10 in a year because someone else has gone and eaten your lunch. So I'm really excited for that as well, right? It'll take time. It'll take 10 years for it to really expand. But I do think we're on that precipice where we start seeing the tools not just used for run-of-the-mill applications, but to be used to solve the true existential problems that these businesses are facing.
Got it. Yeah, definitely things are changing rapidly. So I like that. So in terms of what's next for you and your company, what are you most excited about the future?
Well, one of the things that we're working quite a lot on is a tool called Inforge that we acquired recently. And we saw such an opportunity for immense application of AI, specifically through the go-to-market lens, right? Analyzing the data that's coming through and being prescriptive about what should we be doing with teams, what should we be doing with comp plans, what should we be doing with pricing and packaging and data cleanliness. And so we're currently building bespoke solutions through that platform for our clients, our enterprise clients. And that's really been sort of the cutting edge to be able to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, this is what you need to be paying attention to, and this is what you should do about it. Not just telling them things, but packaging that with a prescribed fix or action. That's very proprietary. We've been working on that with a number of early adopters, and so far the trend is just incredible. All super confidential, but nevertheless very exciting.
Love it, Seamus. Thank you so much for this insightful conversation. We're almost on time, so thank you for sharing your journey. And for our listeners that want to learn more about you and your company, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so SBIgrowth.com or CarabinerGroup.com, both will get you where you need to be. And then I'm on LinkedIn. There's only one Seamus Ruiz-Earle, so feel free to reach out there. Always happy to chat with people.
Awesome. This was a great thank you so much, Seamus.
Yes, likewise. Thanks for having me.